Welcome back to Sunday Vibes, one and all. Still not in the pub, although I'm putting it out there into the universe today. We're going to try and make that happen over the next 2 weeks. I think it's only right, we're drinking in the pubs. It's time we start shooting Sunday Vibes in the pub, in my opinion. Now, we haven't got Patrick Bamford today. It's his birthday, so wish him happy birthday in the comments below. Instead, we've got Dougie Critchley and Christopher Hamill. Gents, how we doing?
All good, thank you. Yeah, no, excited to be back on Sunday Vibes. Sun is shining, ready to rumble.
Absolutely bloody superb, thank you, mate. And I do rate that Patrick's birthday present to himself is absence from this show.
Yeah, got to respect it, to be fair. Let's jump straight into the questions, though. The first one was sent in by Jorge McKinso, who says, what signings do the promoted sides need to make in order to secure their survival? Now, we're shooting this on Wednesday, the day after the playoff final in which Fulham beat Brentford 2-1. We'll come on to that a little bit later, but we may as well kick it off with the champions of the championship, Marcelo Bielsa's Leeds hamster.
Leeds. Yes, I went down an absolute rabbit hole this morning, so if this comes across in quite a chaotic fashion, I apologise to no one. I thoroughly enjoyed researching him, though. What a season they've had, and comfortable winners of the championship in the end by 10 points, right? And so much for Bielsa burnout. Demystified that as well. Won 12 of their last 14 games. Absolutely superb in the running. And they're a really interesting proposition coming into the Premier League, because they did it in some style, didn't they, in the championship? They finished in utterly dominant fashion, only outscored by Brentford, although expected goals thinks they should have scored 89, which is something we'll touch upon in a moment.
Jesus.
When we kind of scour around for a striker. They had the best defensive record in the division as well, conceding just 35 goals in the process. And consistency has been key to all of this. And players staying fit, to be fair, because Bielsa likes to keep a small, intimate squad, and they were unlucky this season before on that front. Their season kind of derailed when key personnel got injured. Didn't happen to them as much this season. They were able to plug those gaps a little bit better when it did. Only 12 players, by the way, racked up more than 2,000 minutes. That's a crazy small squad. They really sort of... Oh, there's that little strum of a guitar in the background. They literally took it upon themselves, put it on their shoulders, a very small group of players to carry Leeds over the line. And they largely did it with the same guys as to when he arrived, and playing the same sort of football consistently all the way through, deploying that 4-1-4-1 formation. Did mix it up at times. Remember, a 3 at the back at various points. But clearly they're all fluent in Bielsa ball now, this squad. And as such, they led the league for shots against, shots on target, possession. Defensively speaking, they were second for tackles, fourth for interceptions, which takes some doing, doesn't it, when you're having the most of the ball to also clock up that many defensive actions. Absolutely insane. And like I said, what must be really satisfying for the owners, for the board, for the manager, is that they've done it with... chiefly by improving existing personnel. And I think there is a sense that those players, at least the key components, will get their chance to prove that they can be Premier League players. So I don't think there's major surgery needed. I'm going for sort of like 4 to 5 signings. I'll tell you who I've scattered out in just a second. Obviously, they've made some moves already, right? Costa returns on a permanent from Wolves. I think he was 16 mil, which is the most they've paid for a player in a decade or so. They've obviously made great use of the loan market throughout Bielsa's tenure. Harrison, White, who else? Jack Clark as well, to a lesser extent. They've just agreed as well another year with Man City for Jack Harrison. They were supposed to buy him on a permanent for £8 million, but they've clearly learnt from times gone by. They're a bit more financially savvy now, aren't they? And they've said, okay, we'll buy him for a little bit more. We'll buy him for 10 million if you let us loan him for another season, just to see if he can cut it at Premier League level, to see if he can still create, over 2 chances per 90 in England's elite league. So really good step securing him, because he was great for them down the left, wasn't he? However, they do need a striker, and I think Radrizzani was talking about Edison Cavani, but he may have got swept up in the emotion of getting promoted.
And Zlatan, mate. And Zlatan as well. Let's not forget he was mentioning Zlatan. And what's happened to poor old Jean-Kevin Augustin?
Well,
I wouldn't feel too sorry for him.
There's a I know, it's pretty sad because he's kind of in the middle of a legal dispute, right? In the Leeds were supposed to buy him for £18 million if they got promoted. They've been promoted, but they are now saying they weren't promoted when the contract stipulated. Yeah, it's all very sticky.
Okay, they're using COVID
Classic
to get out.
Corona
Yeah,
situation.
pretty much. So they weren't promoted by X date because of COVID. So they think the contract is sort of null and void, and it's now going to be taken to the courts, I imagine. It's become a pretty protracted situation. But you're right to flag that, because I don't think he actually features in Leeds' plans. And
it's a lot of money, isn't it? £18 million for Leeds. It's a lot of money.
I don't think Bielsa was keen on him. Only made fleeting substitute appearances. Apparently his attitude was brought into question, and the sort of aggressiveness with which he trained, or lack of aggressiveness. We know that he likes his players to subscribe to his way, or it's the sort of highway kind of thing. So yeah, that does leave them up creek a little bit. They have been linked with Ollie Watkins as a result of Brentford not getting promoted. He of course has that £18 million release clause in his contract.
They'll do well. And they'll do well to get him, I think.
I think they would as well. So I'll start by asking, what you guys make of Watkins. Do you think he's got the ability to go to a bigger club, or do you think Leeds is the sort of right destination, is the right next step in his career?
Joe, you take this. You've been building him up for years.
Yeah, I think he's a fantastic player. Obviously, come through the ranks at Exeter City, so I've kind of seen him play from quite a young age. And he actually came through at Exeter City as a central midfielder. So he's progressed up the field throughout his career, found himself in this striking role, out and out striking role now at Brentford. But he's also very versatile. He can play on both flanks. He can play in that 10 space. He's actually quite good at build-up. Although you saw last night in the playoff final, he's also a really good point man. Knows how to use his physicality. He can hold the ball up pretty well. So he'd be a great signing for probably 5 or 6 Premier League clubs, I think, this summer, who are looking for either a starting number 9. Maybe you're Aston Villa and you're thinking, we need more firepower going forward. Dean Smith worked with him at Brentford, and I wouldn't be surprised to see that move happen. Yeah. Or maybe a little bit higher up the table. Southampton will be looking to get Europa League football next season. Are they going to put all their eggs in Danny Ings' basket? We know he's got a quite dodgy injury record. They could probably do with a little bit more firepower to support him up there. So I would be surprised if Leeds were able to get hold of Ollie Watkins. At £18 million, I think even the likes of Tottenham might be interested as a backup to Harry Kane.
Yeah, I think it's good that they're targeting him though. He is the right sort of profile of player. Yeah. 26 goals in the Championship last season, 3 assists in 46 appearances. More than his previous 2 seasons at Brentford combined, right? But that has kind of coincided with, like you said, him becoming a more out-and-out number 9.
Definitely.
And I mean, he's 24, so now it feels like the right time for him to move, doesn't it? Decent underlying numbers as well. It goes without saying when you're producing sort of 26 goals. But another striking candidate that I saw Leeds linked with, and it's not necessarily, someone that I've brought into the fold, but Michy Batshuayi, who of course trained with Marcelo Bielsa at Marseille. He said he had quite a frosty relationship with him, but then one day Bielsa hobbled up to him and said, when you leave Marseille, it's going to be for £40 million. And this is he said he didn't speak to him for weeks at a time, and then sort of when Bielsa was on his way out of a club, he paid him the ultimate compliment by effectively saying, listen, Michy, I rate you, and you're going to go for a large sum of money. He did to Chelsea the season after, but barring a few sort of productive loan spells, he's never really made good on his potential, which feels harsh because he's done well in limited minutes in several places, right, apart from Valencia, but Valencia are an absolute mess. So he might not be the worst person to move for with a year left on his contract if they can get him for the right price. If you can get Batshuayi...
Heavy wage as well,
yeah,
heavy
if you
wage.
Can get him on a reduced wage for a fee under 10 million because he's only got a year left on his contract and he's not the most desirable sort of player at the moment. He's become the forgotten man, hasn't he? Then I don't think that is necessarily a bad move. Right, I think it's probably going to be more useful if I tell you who I think Leeds need. I'm going full podcast here. This is getting quite extensive. But goalkeeper, right back cover, or someone that can play right back and left back. Centre back, particularly if Ben White leaves. Now,
do you not think Luke Ayling's going to play most of the games, captain?
Yeah, I think he will, but they are very shallow in that regard. Okay. So after him, it's not great. There's not great squad depth in that area. Yeah, so if Ben White is, not forced to go back to Brighton, but if they can't renegotiate with Brighton, then they're up shit creek, aren't they? Because Ben White has been absolutely superb for them this season, or last season now. Over 4 defensive actions, the second most accurate passer in that team, large pass volume, the most interceptions in the league, really intelligent defender, and he's been crucial to sort of Leeds' success. I think he might have won Young Player of the Season there as well, if memory serves me correctly. What's going for them at the minute in terms of re-securing him is that Brighton have just bought Veltman in from Ajax, right? And they've also got, I've got these noted down somewhere, Webster, Duffy, Dan Burn, Dunk. Dunk might be the factor that froze this deal for them, though, because apparently Dunk has been linked quite heavily with Chelsea for 35 mil. And
really?
Yeah, it's really weird. And Brighton, their director of football, or their technical director's name escapes me now.
Dan Ashworth. Yeah.
Dan Ashworth, yes, very good. He wants 4 centre backs. So if they're able to retain, the likes of Dunk, then I think they might let White go back on loan, at least on loan to Leeds. Okay, so after centre back, we have an attacking midfielder to kind of not replace Pablo Hernandez, but at least share some minutes with him, right? Because he's 35 now, and 2 centre forwards. The options.
You're not having Patrick Bamford. Can we just raise him?
16 goals, decent return. He's got unreal movement, by the way. I've only watched Leeds sort of a full 90 minutes, 3 to 5 times this season, but every time I do, I think he's got unreal movement. He takes, I think, league leading amount of touches inside the box. His link up is absolutely fantastic, but he does pass up big opportunities. I think Watkins probably is a bit more decisive than him in that regard. And then, if you think Batshuayi is cover, that forward line is looking much more complete. I do have some other names, but I am conscious of how long I'm talking for at the moment. But yeah, what do you think of some other targets then? At centre back, I've got potentially Ben Godfrey from Norwich.
I can't see them being able to afford him. I think he's out of their price range by a distance.
He's been linked with some Italian clubs in recent weeks, hasn't he? Big Italian clubs as well.
I saw
AC Milan, Napoli.
I saw sort of 45 million euros being talked about on Twitter. I just don't think Leeds are going to pay anywhere near that for Ben Godfrey, in my opinion. I think centre-back is such a hard position. They'll have Phil Jones if they want him. Off Man United, we'll sell him Phil Jones. If you want Philip, you can have Phil Jones, boy.
Yeah, I think he'll probably pass Bielsa on Phil Jones, and needing someone that can, spray it adeptly from the back. Phil Jones isn't the first player that springs to mind. He's also, Bielsa, I think he's said a couple of times, I don't know if this is him personally or Leeds as a collective, that they're fans of Juan Foyth as well at Tottenham. Dude, what do you make of Juan Foyth?
I like Juan Foyth. I think he's quite. He showed that he was pretty tempestuous at times in his desire to sort of crunch into challenges. I remember him getting a few silly bookings. I think he even gave away a couple of penalties. But on the ball, he looks really, really promising, and he doesn't seem like he's in Mourinho's good books whatsoever. So I think a loan for Juan Foyth would be fascinating, and Bielsa clearly rates him from what I've read about that too. They're also being linked with John Stones, who I feel like could definitely use with an opportunity to go somewhere else in the Premier League. Clearly 4th or 5th choice, possibly with Ake coming in at Man City. Although would probably aim for a bigger club than Leeds potentially, unless there's some romanticism in him with the concept of working under Bielsa for Leeds back in the Premier League after so long. But I think Spurs or Arsenal, Arsenal have a multitude of centre-backs at the moment, but if they shift some out, John Stones would be a pretty good pickup for a lot of teams, I think, this year. I think
he's got Everton written all over him, hasn't he? A return to Goodison.
Could do. His confidence has looked pretty shot. His underlying numbers are really still quite solid, but his confidence has just really taken a massive dip, and Fernandinho and Eric Garcia were very much still playing ahead of him at the end of the year. So John Stones could definitely do with a move, but whether it's to Leeds, that only time will tell.
Yeah, I think John Stones, the Arsenal rumours made more sense to me. I think if Man City make him available, which I don't think they will, because I think they've learnt from painful lessons prior about not having enough depth at centre-back, he could probably move to another Champions League club. I don't think his stock has fallen that dramatically. But they do need someone of that ability to come in if Ben White doesn't. Ben White played every single minute last season, by the way. Absolutely
crazy in the
astounding.
Championship.
So moving on very quickly to attacking midfield. Apparently, and this excites me, Leeds have already made contact with Norwich about Buendia. There's going to be people competing for his signature. You've already spoke about Everton. I think they've inquired about him several times as well, haven't they? And he's probably going to cost him between 20 to 30 mil, but well worth it in my opinion. Some of the names that I've just put on a shortlist, hastily assembled shortlist this morning, was Ryan Fraser. They've got no real left wing cover, although Jack Harrison is going to be first choice, I imagine, after the season he's just had. And then I sort of went to some overachieving teams on the continent that, and I gravitated towards La Liga because of Bielsa's technical demands. Gerard Moreno at Villarreal might have been an interesting shout. 18 goals, 28, might not cost the world to prize from the Yellow Submarine. And Mikel Merino, because they've got no real DM cover. I mean, Phillips is their best player. Merino can play a little bit more box to box or as a deep line playmaker. But his stock has gone through the roof at Sociedad, hasn't it? So I'd be surprised if he's available for anything less than 30 mil. So
what about somebody a little bit like Ibrahim Sangare? I know that we link with him with every team, don't we? Early doors. Yeah. I feel like he's just a stock name for Football Daily now. I think pick him up.
I think I've just stopped putting him in my scripts now because it's like literally we own stock in the guy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think a goalkeeper's a little bit stickier. It's the only one I've not spoke about because obviously Casilla banned 8 games for the apparent racial abuse. I think Leeds want shot of him because of that. They've brought in Meslier, who was their number one in the run-in, and whether or not they think he's ready for Premier League football is yet to be determined. I know that Bielsa's a fan of Sergio Romero. His compatriot. Manchester United might be willing to let him go.
I think Sergio Romero would struggle to play. I think he can only train a couple of times a week. His knees aren't particularly great. One name I wanted to mention in the goalkeeping department, I think would be a great pickup for Leeds, is Ben Foster. I think Ben Foster would be a fantastic signing.
Solid.
For them. Really surprised he hasn't been picked up by another Premier League team already. Massive Premier League experience, real leader on the team. Still a very good goalkeeper as well, by the way, playing behind an average at best Watford defence. So I think he picked up for nothing.
I'm not sure sort of how adept he is with his feet, which is kind of a demand in a Bielsa system, isn't it? But his experience would be unreal for them. Also, if Callum Wilson's available from Bournemouth for between 15 and 20, of course. 35 Premier League goals in his last 4 seasons. That was exponentially improving, wasn't it? Until their ill-fated campaign this year. So if they can get him for the right price, leading that line or interchanging with Bamford might be an appealing prospect for him. He was mentally psyched up for a £50 million move to Chelsea about 18 months ago. So yeah, whether or not he joined a promoted side is left to be seen. He also, like John Stones, have Premier League options, I imagine. So I'm going to leave that with you guys. Let it ruminate with the guys watching as well. So stick your suggestions for Leeds in the comments below and let me know what you think of mine. But should we move on now?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Should we go to West Brom? I'm doing West Brom, yeah. I mean, in contrast to Leeds, they really did sort of limp over the line in the Championship. So if Brentford had won either of their final 2 games, they would have gone up automatically. West Brom only finished 2 points above Brentford. They had the second best attack and the third best defence. So they were, in that mix. But they really did not finish the season well. So they were top of the Championship for 24 game weeks, which was actually more than Leeds with 19. But they nearly threw it away at the end. They only won 3 of their final 9 matches, drawing 4 and losing 2, with sort of problems at both ends. They only scored 13 goals in that time. They conceded 8. But, it was really their form in the first half of the season that got them up in the end. From their first 20 games, they lost just 1 game, which was against Leeds. But they only won 9 of their final 26. So there are some serious question marks about West Brom and their ability to stay in the league. In that latter part of the year, they lost to Middlesbrough, Wigan, Huddersfield Town, who all finished at the bottom end of the table, although Wigan Athletic, unfortunately, not their fault. So they certainly didn't come up for the first time since 17-18, playing particularly well in the final few weeks. But in terms of their system, unlike Bielsa, who's pretty flexible in what he wants and how he sets up his team. Slaven Bilic is a consistent manager. He played 4-2-3-1 in every single game last season, except for one when he played 4-4-2 against Charlton at home. So he doesn't mix it up a lot, and their attacking stats looked really good. So they were second for shots, they were third for shots on target, fourth for possession. Defensive stats not so good. Fifth for shots against, 21st for tackles and 24th for interceptions. And having not watched that much West Brom this season, I couldn't really get my head around that. So West Brom fans, let us know in the comments. Basically what I assumed it was, so much possession in an attacking area and then perhaps drift back into sort of low block and aren't that keen to win the ball high up the pitch like Leeds are. So a bit more defensively minded than their fellow automatic promotion team. And they do, like Leeds, need some firepower up front. Both their top scorers, Charlie Austin and Hal Robson-Kanu, are 31 plus. And their player with their second most total goal contributions, Grady Diangana, was on loan from West Ham. Similarly, Filip Krovinovic was on loan from Benfica. He wasn't as deadly as Diangana or Matias Pereira, who I'm going to come on to, but he still played 40 league games. So there is some attacking sort of depth to be recruited for sure. But the good news is that they got their main man in. We talked about Grady Diangana throughout the season, but Matias Pereira had far more impact in terms of goals and assists, and they've already signed him permanently for £9 million from Sporting Lisbon. Does seem like a little bit of a risk at Premier League level, because this was the first season that he'd performed really well. He'd been relegated with Nuremberg the year before from the Bundesliga and never really had a consistently top spell in any of the clubs he'd played for before. So there'll be question marks over him. But he does look really exciting. He's a number 10 who can play on either wing. 8 goals and 16 assists in the Championship this year.
Strong.
3 shots, which was third in the squad. 3.1 key passes, first in the squad. 1.7 dribbles. So these are the sort of numbers we were seeing from the likes of Buendia before they came up last year, and James Maddison before that as well. But their big man that they'll be targeting this summer is Grady Diangana, this talent from West Ham. And it looks like it's going to be pretty difficult to get him. David Moyes has already said he's in his plans for next year. Diangana supposedly has his doubts about whether he'll get into the first team there, so maybe a potential loan could be organised. But West Ham are in a pretty strong negotiating position as well, because they've got him tied down till 2025. So it will be really difficult to get Diangana permanently without paying quite a fee. The 22-year-old contributed 8 goals and 6 assists in 30 league games this season, despite missing 5 months with a hamstring injury. So those numbers could have been even better. And with West Brom, it's quite difficult because they do have some players with Premier League experience. You know, Jake Livermore, Matt Phillips, Robson-Kanu, Charlie Austin, Hegazi, Kieran Gibbs. But none of them you would say are in either the prime of their career or had particularly successful time of it in the Premier League. I mean, Charlie Austin...
They all give me the face, and I'm like... Oh.
Exactly. I mean,
Do you know what I mean?
Charlie Austin had that one fantastic year at QPR, and then at Southampton he was consistently producing around 6 to 7 league goals a year, but that's not going to keep a team like West Brom up. They need someone to hit over at least 10, and probably a couple of people to hit over 10. So it does make sense who they've been linked with. They've been linked with, like Lille, Alfredo Morelos, and which I think is a bit of a risk, given that he's very hot-headed, as we all know. He doesn't look like he takes himself too seriously in terms of his conditioning. But having said that, his statistics at Rangers are pretty promising. 44 goals and 11 assists in 91 league games since the start of 17-18. But
in the SPFL, though.
In the SPFL. And numerous red cards and yellows in there as well. The promising thing about him, his age, he's only 24, so they could probably sell him on in 2 years if it doesn't go quite to plan. And he had a very good Europa League campaign. He got 8 goals in 6 games, which does suggest that maybe he can step up to the next level.
I think if you include the qualifiers as well, he got something like 14 and 16 in Europe, which is why his stock is so high and why he's wanted at Lille. And he's returned in, like you said, in a very suspect condition.
Yeah.
Got some unfair criticism for the game against Aberdeen last weekend, I think. He played a false 9 to great effect as well, got an assist. Like he's probably better at dropping deep and linking up the play than some people give him credit for. Not the most, not the classiest of finishers, I guess. Like I think Edouard is a much more well-rounded player, but but still, he is, the second most desirable player in Scotland. And I think if you can get him for around £15 million, it's a gamble worth taking.
Yeah, it's worth a punt, and especially with Charlie Austin, Robson Carney, they probably need 2 new strikers to go in there as well. But they have been linked with some wide talent as well. Eberechi Eze, QPR's Eberechi Eze, who got 14 goals and 8 assists this year in 46 league games. They've been linked with him as well. But yeah, as you say, he's been linked with West Ham. He's been linked with Crystal Palace. It seems almost inevitable that Wilf Zaha will leave this summer. Crystal Palace seems like a very natural fit for him. And even West Ham, a much more attractive option than West Brom at this moment in time.
Who hasn't been linked with West Ham, by the way? Every year. Who
hasn't
been linked with West Ham?
I know. It's as easy as filling papers as Man United at times, West Ham. They are, in terms of other areas, I looked at fullbacks. They're actually quite strong. Gibbs, Ferguson and Townsend were all got a lot of plaudits for their performances this year. I'd say they need a standout centre-back because, we saw Hegazi in his first stint in the Premier League. A useful player in the opposition box, but pretty immobile. And I was thinking centre-backs that could be available for West Brom. Maybe Vestergaard. I know that he had that spell out the team at Southampton under Ralph Hasenhüttl. Though he did come back into it in the last 3 or 4 games as well. And potentially they could get him for quite a cut price fee. Benkovic has never had a look in at Leicester City, although it seems like he will be brought through maybe when Evans retires in a year or 2. I also thought about Juan Foyt as well.
Yeah, I think he's. I don't know if Benkovic has got if there's an obligation to buy or a fee agreed with Bristol. Is it Bristol City?
Oh, really?
I'm not quite sure. I do know that he's been out there on loan. I was thinking, what about Robin Koch at Freiburg, Dukes? Have you ever heard of him?
Okay, I mean, I don't know a lot about Robin Koch, to be fair.
Yeah, I forgot to mention him for Leeds, but I think he could be a good pickup for a side coming up, actually. He's just got his first cap for Germany. And performed really well for Freiburg, but not to hijack your section, mate. Carry on.
Oh, nice. Well, I mean, I was thinking along those.
What about Craig Dawson as well?
I thought about Craig Dawson. Did have a pretty mixed campaign, I would say. I think Watford, blew hot and cold. Their defence wasn't particularly solid at any stage of the season. But Craig Dawson did play for West Brom for 9 years, exactly. Yeah. Probably might not want to go back there so soon after leaving. But I thought if Chelsea get rid of Christensen or Zuma, I'm sure they have bigger aspirations than West Brom, but maybe they can strike a deal there. And then I think you want to sprinkle a bit of star quality in there with a couple of loans. I mean, Man United want to get rid of Jesse Lingard. Could West Brom bring him on loan? Quite a drop-off for Jesse Lingard, but I can't really see that many other Premier League teams that are going to go for him. Similarly, Reiss Nelson needs a lot more Premier League experience. Seems like he's at the bottom of the pecking order of the young talents coming through at Arsenal. Ryan Sessegnon needs a lot of minutes as well. So these are the sort of players that West Brom are going to have to target. But massive credit to West Brom because it's easy to forget that they lost on penalties in the semi-finals of the playoffs the year before. But they got, built under Bilic some exciting attacking players. I think they'll struggle in the Premier League unless they strengthen pretty heavily, to be honest. But well done to West Brom for getting back there. And I'm, intrigued to see who they bring in this summer.
Yeah, definitely. So am I. I mean, let's talk about Fulham then, because obviously they beat Brentford last night 2-1 in the playoff final. Fully deserved as well. Brentford didn't really turn up on the night, and I think Scott Parker got his tactics absolutely spot on. I think BMW, the Brentford forward line, only had 4 shots or something like that. So congratulations to Scott Parker for that one, because that is absolute miracles. And he did it as well without Mitrovic, who played, I think, 30 minutes or 35 minutes with a torn hamstring. And even himself after the game, Mitrovic was saying, I shouldn't be in the squad. I'm not even remotely close to being fit. Missed both semi-finals as well. And he's been their kind of talismanic figure, hasn't he? But Fulham's season as a whole, I obviously haven't watched Fulham in depth for every week, so I went to Henry Hill, our resident Fulham fan, and I asked him a load of questions. I said, what did you make of the season? Who's your weaknesses? Who's your strengths, etc.? And he was kind of saying, look, we've had a mixed season, to be honest with you. They won 23 of 46 games, so didn't win an awful lot, but were very consistent. And he was saying that what happened with them an awful lot was they'd win one big game, a crucial game, and then they'd lose 2 or 3 silly ones fairly quickly after that. And there's a stat I've got written in front of me here that they went on 4 runs of 3 matches without winning, which is surprising given that they actually were pretty solid. They never got into the automatic playoff places, but they were pretty much throughout the entire season in the playoff places. And you can see why, because overall as a team, they're pretty solid. Ended up 4th for the championship, 2 points off them, 7th best attack, 4th best defence. So they're a playoff team, and in the playoffs, they were by far the best team. in my opinion. You've got to take your hat off to Scott Parker for that as well, because he plays an attractive brand of football, possession-based, attacking. It's fairly similar to Jokanovic, not identical, but fairly similar. You can see where he's taken a few of these tactics from. And I thought the final was the perfect example of where he got it spot on. You know, that free kick from Joe Bryan, that was Scott Parker's idea. He pulls him to one side before he takes a free kick. He says, the keeper's in a very aggressive starting position. We've practiced it all week, and I want you to shoot here. And he shot, and it went in. So that in that
Genius.
moment, obviously, is a bit of genius from Scotty Parker.
And a whole lot of luck.
Yeah, I mean, a whole lot of luck, but it's well executed by Joe Bryan and well planned by Scotty Parker. They've been working on it in training because they'd identified him as being way too advanced in his positioning a number of times throughout the season, the goalkeeper.
No,
so I think you've got to take your hat off there to Scott Parker for that one. In terms of their best players, obviously Alexander Mitrovic is probably their best player. 26 goals in 40 games this season. Outstanding striker for a championship side, really. He is a Premier League striker, probably could have done a job for most of the Premier League teams this season. So if they can keep hold of him next season, he's easily ready to start in that number 9 role, providing he's fit. You know, super aggressive, great hold-up play, fantastic point man for a team like Fulham. And then the other star player, you probably look at Michael Hector. You know, didn't come into the team until January, but what a difference he's made to this side. A player that throughout his career has just spent his life on loan, really. He's had 15 loan moves from Reading and Chelsea, from everywhere from sort of like lower leagues all the way up to Frankfurt. So he's had quite a varied footballing education, but he has been a revelation since he came to Fulham. Fantastic defender. The goal line clearance against Cardiff in the semis was a piece of absolute genius, and going into next season he looks ready-made as a Premier League centre-back, in my opinion. The issue they have in terms of weaknesses is a partner for him, because I think we can all remember Tim Ream's last spell in the Premier League, and I think it's being kind to say he wasn't good enough for that Fulham side when they last came up, so he's not good enough for it this time. I don't think Dennis Adoy is good enough either, and Alfie Mawson just isn't in favour of Scott Parker, I don't think. So I think Scott Parker will definitely go for a centre-back. Another one of the issues, obviously, Harrison Reed, who's been the sort of pitbull, Scott Parker-esque midfielder in Scott Parker's team. He's obviously on loan from Southampton, and there's a lot of chat at the moment with Pierre-Emile Højbjerg looking to join Tottenham Hotspur in that £15 million swap deal with Kyle Walker-Peters, that Hasenhüttl might actually say to Harrison Reed, you know what, there's game time here for you in this midfield if you want it, which would be a massive blow to Fulham. So it's absolutely crucial that they get him back, whether it's on loan or on a permanent. They really need to get Harrison Reed back at Craven Cottage. And then I guess some firepower to support Mitrovic as well is another area that they're quite reliant on, because, you know, Bobby, Reed, Cavallero, Cabano and Kamara, 21 goals combined in 135 league games behind Mitrovic is not good enough. So they're going to need some firepower to back him up. And I was looking at Fulham, and I actually think they're quite an attractive prospect, because they're London-based, which, as much as people don't want to admit it, that is definitely a draw for a lot of players to be able to live in London rather than live in West Brom or in Leeds, to be totally honest with you. And I think Khan, the owner, is going to hopefully have learnt his lesson from last time, where clearly they spent money sporadically and they signed like 3 keepers, didn't they? And it was all a bit of a mess. So hopefully he's going to calm down and spend money wisely this summer, because the post-match interview with Scott Parker last night, he was saying, look, I've learnt the lessons from last time we came up to the Prem. I'm going to try and stick by our guns and add the right players to the team. I think that's probably the way to go. Don't be doing what Villa did this summer, what Fulham themselves did the year before, and just spunking £100 million on nonsense. So I think sort of 3 to 4, maybe 4 or 5 signings is the right way to go, as long as you can keep Harrison Reed.
I actually rated some of their business last time. Like, I think it's quite easy to sit here and say, like, stick with your guys and don't spunk 100 million. There might have been a couple of suspect players, but I mean they signed 3 goalkeepers. But they changed system pretty dramatically, didn't they? Halfway through the year when they appointed Ranieri instead of having Jokanovic.
Yeah, I mean, most of the signings didn't work, but some of the signings are still at the club. So Ongisa, for instance, is obviously on loan at Villarreal. I would say they should bring him back,
He
and,
had a
and they
superb
should try and
season.
integrate him into this season. He's had a great season at Villarreal. Villarreal are desperately trying to get a £25 million deal done with Fulham. But if I was Fulham and let's say Harrison Reed doesn't come back, then I would definitely be trying to keep on Gisa. I think it would be silly to sell him for €20 million because you're going to struggle to find a defensive midfielder that can produce that output for a similar amount of money. In terms of a centre-back, to partner Hector, I think is the hardest area to fill if you're Fulham, just because I think the centre-back market is really thin. One suggestion I put towards Henry, and he was like, yeah, really keen, is Chris Smalling.
Back it.
Now, I think they do well to get Chris
Back at the
Smalling because
cottage.
he's probably got ambitions higher than Fulham, but obviously not going to go to Roma now. Looks like Roma have agreed a deal with Jan Vertonghen to fill that role, and Chris Smalling is going to be available for £15 million. That's what Man United wanted for him from Roma. Roma weren't willing to pay £15 million. They wanted him on loan with a sort of €6 million option to buy, with the reports. So Chris Smalling at £15 million, coming off the back of a fantastic season in Italy. I think if you could get him for that, I think there'll be a lot of Premier League teams interested, to be honest with you, because centre-back talent on the market is pretty few and far between. And of course, he's a former Fulham player as well. The issue for him is just going to be wages and convincing him to play for Fulham, I think. No offence to Fulham, but there's probably better clubs that will be interested in Chris Smalling's services, the likes of Everton. So I'll put Chris Smalling forward as a centre-back candidate. And then in the attacking areas, in terms of a bit more firepower alongside the likes of Mitrovic, I've got a few names I wanted to throw your way. Gerard Deulofeu, I think would be a really interesting signing for Fulham. Probably willing to come to London as well and get a bit of game time. Him or Ismaila Sarr. But I think Ismaila Sarr's probably got a higher level he's going to want to go to just because of his age. And I also think David Brooks would be a really good signing for Fulham. Again, you're going to be competing with some established teams like some Newcastle maybe for his signature. But coming off the back of an injury hit season, maybe you get him when other teams don't want to take the risk. Obviously, they're continuously linked with Ryan Sessegnon, have been linked again today, which I don't think would be the worst option. But when I put it towards Henry, he was quite sceptical about Ryan Sessegnon coming back. He said that when we sold him, we didn't think he was actually going to go on to be a star, and it's been proven right at Tottenham Hotspur, and they were very happy with the fee. I don't know whether that's just a Fulham fan kind of being a bit biased, but I think he would be okay at Fulham. I'm not sure he'd be the man to drive them forward because is he going to be a left back? Is he going to be a left winger? Where's he going to want to play under Parker? Could be an interesting signing. I wouldn't write it off. And then the final one is a name we've already mentioned. I think we've mentioned him anyway. Josh King. I don't know whether we spoke about Callum Wilson, didn't we?
Yeah.
But Josh King, I think, would maybe be as good, if not a better option than Callum Wilson.
I've read that Bournemouth are
for the
happy
likes
to
of
let Wilson and King go, and then combined with that Ake fee, rebuild. I don't think they'll let Brooks go, to be totally honest. I think you'll do really well to get Brooks out of Bournemouth. Apparently their Russian owner is really determined to come up at the first time of asking. I think he's going to try and build it around Brooks, but you know, King or Wilson would be fantastic pickups, I think, for a club like
Yeah,
Fulham.
I think I read as well today that Sheffield United are very interested in bringing Brooks back.
Really?
So
They do very well, Sheffield United.
Yeah, I think you're right. He was going to cost a packet, whereas Josh King, I think you could potentially get out for sort of the 15 to 20 million pound mark, and he would actually be pretty decent. Can play all across that front line. Comes from good pedigree, doesn't he? So yeah, those would be my suggestions. I just think the centre back is a problem for Fulham, and I don't know whether the right player's on the market to fill it because I've just got images of Tim Ream starting next season, and if Tim Ream's starting, I think you've got issues in the Premier League.
It's definitely the area I'd be looking at as well. I mean, people forget how poor Fulham were in that year before last. I mean, they only won 7 games. I think they conceded 81 goals,
So bad.
which is 6 more than Norwich this year. And remember how bad Norwich were. So I would prioritise the defence before all else, really. But at least they do look like apparently their keeper they're now really quite happy with. So at least they've got a solid foundation there, unlike last time. But yeah, big question marks to answer for Parker in defence, I would say.
Yeah, so would I. But those are our sort of suggestions for the Championship sides. If you've got any, slam them in the comments below. Let us know how happy you are, Leeds fans, West Brom fans, Fulham fans, about coming up to the Premier League. Let's
One
move.
thing, Tom,
Go on,
listen,
Hamster,
for
what
Leeds
you gonna
fans, I forgot
Yeah.
I didn't discuss this. Bielsa's not signed a new contract yet. And it's kind of...
Oh, he's staying though.
I mean, apparently they've offered him £8 million a year, which is £2 million more than he's being paid at the moment. But it's not. He's not signing the dotted line yet. So, you know what? Before they target anyone, they should be looking to get that wrapped up. And I also read that they're going to expand Ellen Road from 38 to 50,000, which is pretty exciting. So, I think manager, infrastructure, and like championship, young aspirational championship players are the way forward. I actually like the way Leeds are moving at the moment, yeah.
All right, let's move on to a couple quick fire questions then, because we've rambled on about the Championship. The first one, Tamish Bahal. Is Willian to Arsenal a good deal for both parties? What do you make of it, Dukes? Willian to Arsenal.
I'm actually, people are throwing a lot of shade at Arsenal for this deal. I think it's because, Chelsea have signed Werner and Ziyech and they're looking for Havertz. United are obviously chasing Sancho. And Arsenal have a limited budget, and I don't think Willian would be the worst pickup, depending on the wage in that contract. Ornstein said this week that it wasn't as lucrative as his other offer on the table, which was either Inter Miami or at points it was Barcelona, but I think that interest has now quietened. And I think Willian would, he's had a very good season for Chelsea by all accounts, playing in and out of the team, doesn't seem to mind. Apparently he's a consummate pro. He'd bring a winning mentality. And I think sometimes on Football Daily, we're so keen to be like, you need to sign all these 23-year-old players and let them all develop together and it'll be beautiful and you'll win the league within 4 years. And actually, a bit of experience, a bit of know-how, and a great guy supposedly around the training ground could go a long way. And I think if they had him for 2 years on not too big a wage, I think he could be really, a really useful contributor.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think the 3-year deal at £150,000 that's been reported is probably a mistake. Just the length of contract. But yeah, I don't think it's too bad of a signing. My kind of issue is that, do they need another winger? Where does he play? Like, with Nicola Pepe coming through, Saka playing there, Aubameyang's played wide, you've got Reiss Nelson. If you're Reiss Nelson, you're thinking, I'm giving up here then. If they're bringing 31-year-old Willian in to play, as well. He's 34. Martinelli's there. I think it's a bit of an odd one, but obviously Arteta wants experience around the dressing room. The one thing I will say about Willian is he always plays about 20 times better when he's after a new contract, which is what's happened for the last 6 months, I think. So I'm hoping Arsenal get the best out of him, but I think 3-year deal could be a risk. Let's do one more Arsenal quickfire question then. This one for you, Hamill. This one from our guy 12. Can Arsenal move Ozil, and who should they sign to replace him?
I don't know why Ozil would leave. £350,000 a week, family settled in London. He doesn't seem to be the type that's driven purely by the game. I'm not sure if that's fair to say or not, but he's not really agitating for a move, or he's not taking a pay cut to go back to Germany, or I don't know, maybe Turkey. They've come knocking a couple of times, haven't they? So it feels like he's comfortable, and Arsenal just have to live with the ramifications of giving a 30-year-old a long contract. And obviously it's not going to be as, Williams isn't going to be as lucrative, but that's why I'd be quite tentative. And I do agree, Dougie, sometimes we get hung up on the profile of squads, and the younger the better. That is generally our line of thought, right? And that's not always the case. But I do think they're right to be apprehensive about giving a 31, 32-year-old a 3-year contract, given the situation with Mesut Ozil. He's eating an awful lot of wages, and it doesn't give them a lot of room to manoeuvre, does it? It means they haven't got money to give, to put towards fees. I don't. It's quite hard to comment on, though, isn't it? Because what do you say other than, it is what it is.
Yeah, in my opinion, they've just got to move him on, even if it's on loan and you pay 80% of his wage, like United did with Alexis Sanchez, or I think we paid like 60%. It's just so awkward having that man in the squad for so many reasons. In terms of setting bars for wages on signings, it's like, well, Ozil was earning 350. It's immediately a problem. I just think they should be saying to Ozil, I'd be pushing him out of the club if I was Arteta.
Because Arteta wasn't there when that contract was signed, right? Arteta does have an easy get out of jail free card when he could just say, that wasn't my signing, that's not part of my vision, that's not what we're going to do moving forward. So all those kind of cultural things within the squad, I think he can dismiss pretty easily. But yeah, it might also stop them making a couple of speculative signings like Coutinho on loan, you know, who could, if he contributed in the same sense that Dani Ceballos has done this campaign, then that might be worth, you know, moving them up the table a couple of spots, right? So if it's blocking another kind of ambitious loan signing, then yeah, maybe take the wage hit, but he's got to agree to go there as well.
Yeah, that's the thing, is getting him to agree. Right, let's do a personal question then to wrap up. This one from Rush ABH, who says, who is your doppelganger and would you like to meet them? I saw you post a cartoon doppelganger on Insta the other day, Hamill, that was pretty nailed on.
Yeah, I don't know that much about him, to be fair. It was just a comment on Winners and Losers, which I just thought was really funny. It's anyone with glasses, isn't it, really, for me? What about you boys?
It is.
Who have you got, Joe?
I've got Anne with an E. I'm consistently linked to Anne with an E.
That is incredible.
Who the actress is. Consistently linked there. Basically, like you with glasses, I'm just linked to anyone that's ginger.
But Anne with an E's got the same bone structure as you, bro.
Yeah, she does. It's quite odd. It is quite odd.
Separated at birth.
Would I like to meet? I don't even know the actress's name. I just know her as Anne with an E. So would I like to meet him? Sure, but I just don't know who they are. What about you, Dougs? You've got anyone that's bald?
Yeah, I mean, quite a lot recently. I get Wesley Schneider, and I'm wearing an Inter shirt today.
Yeah,
that'll be.
You do have Schneider.
That'll be same with it again. I get Pau Lopez, the Roma goalkeeper. But most notably over the last few years, when Game of Thrones was a thing, I got a lot of Jorah Mormont, who is like a 65-year-old bloke. Yeah. When I was still battling with my receding hairline before I decided to sacrifice it. Which I was quite chuffed with, you know, great character, brave guy.
Mate, he's very. I think people are making the comparisons there based on like his nobility. You know what I mean?
Oh, thank you. He was initially a snake, and then he came round. So
initially a snake. Yeah, I think mine. I'm just gonna go. I mean, Harry Potter. People still think it's absolutely, you know, classic to compare me to Harry Potter in the comments. I mean, pretty dead chat, but
who was the one
I'll go for
Carragher compared you to?
Tim. Yeah, but that's not really our generation, is it? I don't think anyone will know who Timmy Mallett is in the comments. I didn't know who Timmy Mallett was at the time. I was just kind of laughing along politely. But yeah, I'd quite like to meet Daniel Radcliffe, particularly, you know, when he was on The Source about 5 or 6 years ago and was an absolute riot on a night out. So I'd meet him, you know, back then. Sure.
He's a loose cannon.
All right, fair play. So that wraps up Sunday Vibes. We got the podcast this week. Was How to Fix Tottenham, wasn't it?
It was indeed. Yeah, it was me and Pat, and yeah, we sort of debated Mourinho's impact there, and we looked at some defensive signings they could make, particularly at fullback, and some backup strikers too.
Yeah, a very good listen. So if you aren't already subscribed to Football Daily Podcast, go and do that, because we're like 1,000 subscribers away from 20k, I think. So it means a lot. Go and subscribe to that, please. Hamster, anything else to plug?
Yeah, I'm off next week, but I'm leaving you with a one-on-one, and we've managed to get Celtic and Rangers in there because, of course, Sky have the rights for Scottish football this term. So I'm going to be forcing that agenda on Football Daily and Euro Football Daily for the rest of the season. Yeah, we've identified 3 players for each of the Old Firm sides to sign as they enter a pretty historic season. Sky have nailed the timing, to be fair. Celtic could win 10 in a row.
All right, there we have it. Thanks very much for watching, everybody. We'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye.